So most pedal boards don't get too big because we actually need everything on them. They get too big because we are afraid to remove things. And that's exactly what happened with my old pedal board. So I rebuilt the whole thing around one simple question. What do I actually use every time I plug in? And this is the result. For a long time, a pedalboard was built around the possibility of covering as many situations as possible, which sounds good in theory because obviously it's nice to have options, but the more I used it, the more it became obvious that I was not using most of the stuff most of the time. It was more like, maybe I'll need this, or this could be useful, and that's exactly how the board became bigger than it needed to be. It was a Temple Audio Duo 24 with the Quad Cortex on it, a Molly Tremonti power wah, a Digitech Freak Out, a Digitech Drop, and two different power supplies underneath to run everything. It also had lots of custom modules on the sides for power, inputs and outputs and whatsoever. And honestly, there was nothing wrong with it. It was a decent board. The problem was that I built it based on hype or how I wanted it to be and not what I needed. And this is my new setup. This is smaller, easier to carry and faster to set up. And for the way I actually play, it also does more than before. It's a pedal tray Metro 16, very small board, with the Quad Cortex on it, a Harley Benton GPA 100 power amp on the side, and a Chox Soul mounted underneath to power up the Quad Cortex. And that's basically the whole rig. The idea wasn't to make the smallest pedalboard ever, because nowadays with Quad Cortex Mini you can go smaller than that if you want. The main idea was to make a board where every single piece had its own job and purpose, and I will use it 100% of the times. And that's where the concept becomes interesting. The same board can basically work in three different ways. The first way is the Quad Cortex into the Harley Benton GPA 100 straight to a cabinet. For that purpose, I would just have the cap simulation turned off or ignored in the signal path. The Quad Cortex will still give me the preamp or the amp sounds and the effects. The GPA 100 will just amplify that signal so that it can work directly into a 4x12. This is the setup that I will typically use when I'm rehearsing. I'm not going directly into the board, I'm just going into the cabinet and I just want to hear myself in the room. So it's basically kind of like an old school amp cabinet kind of thing, but the Quad Cortex is in this case the digital amp. The second way is the simplest one, direct out from the Quad Cortex. That's the method I use whenever I'm recording, practicing at home, or even playing at gigs where I'm just going direct only. In this case, I will just have my signal path going directly to the two XLR outputs, and I have everything on, including cap simulation, of course. This is literally the fastest setup because I have all my presets leveled out and I just send mono or stereo by using 1 or 2 XLR cables to the front of house, and I probably get some monitoring through the wedges or the in-ear monitors. And the third way is probably the most useful for me. One output goes to the GPA 100 and one output goes to the front of house simultaneously. This means that on stage I can have a real cab and feeling the air moving and having a reference for my sound and hearing myself, or have some stage volume because it pumps you up. But at the same time I'm sending a different signal to the front of house. Right before the cab simulation or the IR block in the Quad Cortex, I would just send a split that will go through the GPA 100 to the cabinet, while the other path is going to the front of house. This allows me to even equalize or optimize the volume of the two signal paths independently. And whenever I have the luxury of having a cabinet on stage, but a huge stage where of course going to a front of house is needed, it's really the best of both worlds. The other big part of an otherwise small board, in this case, it's how it was wired and what it features when it comes to powering up the different devices. The Chox Soul is mounted underneath directly to the board, and its only job is to power the Quad Cortex. So it will use 4 outlets out of the 5 at disposal. The Harley Benton GPA 100 though is powered by an EIC cable, which is basically the same that I need for the Chox Soul. So what I did is that I drilled a hole on the side of the pedal board. I put an EIC inlet or extension cable connected to a split cable with 2 ends going, one to the Chox Soul and one going to the GPA 100. There are a few practical things that I learned from building this pedal board, and I would like to share them with you. First, plan the layout before even buying your pedal board. You can use Pedal Playground or the Rockboat website. They are pretty cool and they offer kind of the same service and it's free. And the Rockboard one even lets you plan the whole signal route and the power cable and the inputs and outputs and whatsoever, because pedalboard sizes are deceptive. Second, I think flat boards are underrated. Angled boards can look cool, especially with some pedals like the old Boss ones which are flat, but in my case the Quad Cortex is already angled. If I'm gonna add one steep inclination of the Quad Cortex to the actual inclination of the board, I will end up with something where I have to pull my foot like that whenever I want to press a button, and it's not really ergonomically wise. Third, the mushroom buttons or barefoot buttons are not only for aesthetics. What I found out, especially if you have an angle board or an angle device like the Quad Cortex, you can put the buttons only on the upper row. In this case, you'll basically obtain 2 different heights on the 2 different rows, allowing you to better press one or the other row more easily, instead of having the switches so close to each other where you may be pressing the upper button and you're pressing the lower button by mistake. Fourth, don't put Velcro or 3M directly on the pedal. Put gaffer tape first and then the 3M or the Velcro. That way you can easily redo, realign if needed, and you can actually remove the whole thing whenever you need to sell the pedal. And finally, build around your use case. Not the imaginary version of your rig, just think what you really need to play comfortably and consistently, but also remembering that the more stuff you put, less you will use every single item you have on the board, and the more frustrated you will be whenever you need to perform because you have too many options. So that was the video. Let me know what you think of my pedal board, and let me know what's your take on building your own pedal board, on what kind of choice you went with. And I guess I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.